Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Today I want to film another recent reads video and want to talk to you about 4 books that I've read recently, more specifically towards the beginning of the month of October. I have mentioned on this channel before that I had challenged myself to read more books in German this month, and I will link down below the video that I filmed in which I presented the German books that are on my TBR at the moment. And I thought I would share with you the 4 that I got to in the first few weeks of the month of October. I'm going to start firstly with one that I had very high hopes for, and I'm happy to say that it did not disappoint. It's a play by Swiss author Friedrich Dürrenmatt called Die Physiker, so the Physicists. I actually talked about this book in my videos on French and German classics that I did together with Claudia from the channel Spencer's Library, and she recommended this to me, and this is probably what pushed me most to pick it up, because I was really curious to see what I make of it. I have experience with Dürrenmatt's work before, and I've read some other of his plays, and one of the ones that I really enjoy is called Der Besuch der alten Dame, which I've also talked about on this channel before, and it's really great. So I kind of knew I would like this, and why I liked it also on a different level than the other play is because this is about science, as you can think from the title. We follow these 3 characters that are living in an asylum, and all 3 of them are physicists. The play opens when an inspector is called to the asylum because one of the nurses was killed by one of the patients. This one patient turns out to be one of the physicists, and so we get to know what is happening in this asylum, how are the patients interacting with each other, and ultimately why did these 3 physicists end up there. And to get to that answer, there's a lot of twists and turns that I did not expect at all, that I loved, because Dürrenmatt's writing is kind of quirky and you kind of expect it to go to weird places. I didn't expect it to go to these kind of weird places, but I can't say that I didn't like it. But what I was looking for the most reading this was to get some insights and discussions into science and the ethics of science, and what does it mean to gain knowledge, and how do you balance getting pure knowledge or getting knowledge that potentially is dangerous for humanity. Basically, can you control science? Can you control knowledge? Can you keep it to yourself if it's getting too dangerous? Or do you have this obligation towards society that you're doing this science because you want to bring the world forward? And this play really gave me that. It gave me a lot to think about, especially through the lens of the main character that we mostly follow, one of the physicists called Möbius. And we learn, I don't want to say too much about it, but we learn very quickly that the fact that he's in this asylum is not because he was put there. He is there by choice, and we get to understand why he deliberately did that and what's hidden behind it, basically. I really love this. I really liked it. It's really short. The German is really accessible. I think it's from the 1960s, and the writing itself is very spared, very to the point, very quirky. So even with not like super strong German knowledge, you can really get through it really fast, and it's quite a page turner, and I would really like to see this performed as a play someday. Next up, I decided that I really want to take the opportunity this month to try some of Rainer Maria Rilke's writing. He is a writer who was born in Prague at the end of the 19th century, and he wrote so many different things. I have read a kind of collection of different poems and letters and philosophical / theological writings that he wrote around Christmas. And so I thought I really want to check out more of his work. And he is very beloved for his poems. So last time I went to a secondhand shop, which is a long time ago, I pick up these two little books. This one is kind of a random collection of some of his poems, and this one is a collection of 3 different short stories that he wrote. Now, starting with the short stories. I didn't know what to expect starting to read his prose, but I didn't really enjoy it that much, I have to say, I'm afraid. These are 3 very small short stories, and they all have this common thread of the meaning between words, what is said when it's not said with words, the importance of like silences and how people look at each other when they're encountering each other. And this was all nice and interesting, and the writing itself is just as lyrical as I remember it to be. But none of these stories really touched me in any way. Like, I didn't really care at all. And considering this book is like not even 100 pages, and that I was like, do I even want to read the next page? I don't really care. There's no connection with the characters. There is no, like, nothing really grabbed me. So I thought, okay, let's try out his poetry. And I'm also not 100% sure that it was a good idea to take this random collection, because this is a collection of, I think, about 50 poems, and they're from throughout his whole writing career, taken from different poetry collections. And I think that at first didn't really help me out, because I feel like when I read poetry, I like to have it in a collection that is coherent, that, you know, a poet thought about which poems he wants to put together and that somehow are related to each other, or he wants to say something with the structure that he puts the poems in. And obviously this was not that at all. It was just a random collection, and they were just put there chronologically. So I think this wasn't really good as well. But again, I had the problem that the language didn't speak to me. I think from these about 50 poems, I highlighted 5 of them that I liked and that in some way spoke to me, which is a very low number. The writing is lyrical, there's no doubt about it, and it is beautiful when you read it out loud. But I just felt like there was something missing, and that I needed something more to actually touch me on an emotional level, because that's what I want my poetry to do. I'm very sorry to say that my experience with Rilke so far is very mixed, and definitely if you have some recommendations, or if you can name me some of his works that you enjoyed, let me know in the comments down below, because I still plan to find something else from him that I enjoy. And I actually think I might turn to his more philosophical works or theological works, because that might be something that's more for me. But to end on a book that I really did enjoy as well, I read Deutsch, sein schwarz, dazu by Theodor Michael. The title translates roughly to being black and German as well, and it has been translated into English, and I will link the information down below if you want to check it out. But I bought this book when I started looking into anti-racist works, and was very much searching on the France and Germany level, because I was missing this conversation here about what we can do to be more helpful and better allies to Black people, because some people seem to forget it, but they also exist in France and in Germany, and they are facing the same kinds of injustice as they are in the US or elsewhere. So I stumbled upon this book, which is a memoir by Theodor Michael about basically his life. And he is born from a father who was originally from Cameroon, emigrated to Germany during the Weimar Republic, so in the 19th century, because Cameroon was a colony of Germany for a very, very short time, up until the First World War, when Germany had to give up her colonies to the winning people, so England and France and so on. So Theodor Michael's father still had the right to go to Germany, and he was recognized as a German citizen and founded a family in Germany and had 3 children, one of them being Theodor Michael, the author of this book. What I really loved about this book is how it spans quite a long time, and it basically goes from the beginning of the 20th century up until today, pretty much. I think Michael died at the beginning of the 2010s, and he wrote this memoir quite later on, and he writes in the little introduction that a lot of people around him, mostly his family and his friends who also experienced injustice because of their skin color, encouraged him to write it. The writing is, nothing like crazy. He is originally an actor, and it's very much a personal memoir, and he is talking in a very straightforward way. There's nothing fancy about it. It's his life, basically. He takes us through his childhood, growing up Black after the First World War, what it was like, and the opportunities that he didn't get to have because of his skin color. But obviously things got really more complicated and more difficult for him, as in the 1930s the Nazi ideology grew in Germany, and he really describes in a very visceral way how it was for him as a child, basically, to see people's opinions around him change and how he suddenly was treated differently and how he was not viewed as a citizen anymore. They actually took away his German citizenship, so he was for some time theoretically without a nation, which, that's forbidden nowadays for good cause. And he also takes us through the ways in which he managed to survive, both financially and psychologically, but also is very open about the tolls that it took on his mental health and on his family life, because he also went to marry German refugees from Schlesien, which is now a territory that belongs to Poland. And yeah, how it affected his life, how he came into doing movies, first because he was Black and they needed, for the Black show, they needed people who were Black. Then came to do cinema and theater. He's just such an interesting person and is a real figure of resilience. I was so impressed by this memoir, and I honestly can't recommend it enough. If you're interested in this, if you're interested in the history of Germany, and if you're interested in memoirs about what it's like to not be white in Germany, then you should definitely read this book. Alright guys, these were the 4 books that I wanted to talk to you about. I would really like to know what you've been reading these days. Probably half of BookTube is reading anything that has to do with Victorian times. I have been reading some Victorian related things, and I'll tell you about them in my next recent reads video. Yeah, let me know what you've been up to, what you've been reading, what you've been enjoying lately. And yeah, I hope in the meantime that you're reading great books, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!